Hey guys, what's up? I'm Kanika, and today I'm going to be diving into the three biggest myths about CRO. And heads up, these might be a little bit controversial, but I'm going to dive right into it and let's see how it goes. Myth number one: isolated, iterative design and development changes are the best way to perform CRO. No, I get it. I'm not against traditional CRO where you focus on one element, figure out what might make it a little bit more user friendly, and then change that and test it one to one against your control. Sure, that makes sense. And over time, as you continue to stack wins, it's called compounding growth, right? So you get a 5% lift, that's awesome. The bigger you are, the better that is. And over the course of a year and some dozen tests, maybe you've boosted your conversion rate on one page or multiple pages by 10, 15, 20%. That's great. That's nothing to be upset about. But is it the best way to perform CRO? I don't think so. And why is that? Because a user journey and a user consideration is not just based on UX. It's not just based on these isolated elements. Instead, when people are deciding whether to purchase your service or your product, they're not going to be taken from, I'm not really sure, to, yep, cool, I'm in, here's my credit card, just because you used a better formatted buy box, or just because you've changed your selector from a drop down to radio buttons, right? There's going to be a percentage of people that, sure, maybe they were confused and they didn't quite get how to use it, and your new update on that selector or that buy box, it pushes them over the edge. But that's a really small percentage of people overall. Instead, you want to focus on the people that really just aren't convinced yet that your product or your service fits their needs. So how do you do that? You do it through a combination of copy, design, development, and you do it in a way that really impacts the entire experience. So you don't just isolate it to one area of the page, right? You want to impact their entire journey. You want to impact their entire experience on your site. And you want to tell them, hey, this is why this is a perfect product or service for you. Here's how it works. Here's why you don't really need to consider other things. All these problems that you faced in the past, they're gone once you get our product. But you're not going to really establish that. You're not going to reach that goal if you're focusing on one isolated element. You want to focus on bigger changes. You want to understand what you need to communicate to your customer, exactly how you need to communicate with them, what might be missing, what are their fears, what do they love about your product, what order does that information need to hit them psychologically, so that they kind of go through that whole desire and interest and ready to take action cycle. How do you need to create that for them? That's what you want to focus on in CRO. And these little isolated tests, they don't give you that. And to be frank, once you learn, great, this drop down works better than this radio button, what does that tell you about your marketing? What does that tell you about your growth? What does that allow you to do with all of your other efforts? There's no flywheel in that. However, if you figure out, here's what people care about, here's where they're interacting, here's what is causing friction, here are the specific messages and the ways that we need to really get this information in front of people, that's a lot of lessons. And those lessons can then be carried over into your paid acquisition, into your email, into retention, into customer service, into sales. There's so much that happens when you lean in harder to the entire experience. So I know that there are limitations sometimes. You don't have enough resources, you don't have, just the bandwidth to be able to think through what this entire new experience should look like. Fine. Traditional CRO is fine. But if you really want to become as efficient as possible, if you really want to reap the benefits of CRO in the best way, you need to think about the entire experience, and you need to test new big swing experiences against each other, and that's how you get big results over time. So that's myth number one. Let's go straight into myth number two, which is you should care about best practices in CRO. Nope, that one's busted too. Best practices, you know what? That is one of those things that is a 50-50 chance, just like anything else, whether it's going to work or whether it's not going to work. At its best, it is a educated suggestion on what could work. But here's the risk that you run if you're just focusing on best practices. You're hearing so much noise from all of these other people, and they all have their unique channels, they have their unique acquisition efforts, they have their unique audiences and what they care about, they have their unique benefits about their actual product or their service, right? There's all these things that make up each individual brand, each individual company, each individual product and service. There are a bunch of little variables that turn it into what it is. You are not that brand. They are not you. You don't have exactly the same thing. Even if you're drop shipping, there's going to be a difference in what works for the marketing efforts and the communications and the people that they attract versus whatever that identity, whatever that culmination of people, what works for them, that's going to be different. And so best practices, the risk that you run is you waste a lot of time, you waste a lot of resources, you waste a lot of energy because you're just shooting in the dark. Right? To actually get momentum on things, to actually build towards success, you're not just throwing spaghetti at a wall over and over and over and over and over again, even after something wins. What you're doing and what you should do is set your target, you aim, you fire. Okay, you're a little bit off to the right. Great. Now take that data, take that analysis, and you're going to re-aim. Great. Aim, fire. Okay, now you're a little closer to that target. Finally, over time and iterations and over learning about what works for your audience, you're going to hit that bullseye. But when you're just bouncing from best practice to best practice to best practice to best practice, you're not getting any closer. You're just aiming randomly without recalibrating and firing. And you're not really paying attention to where that bullet goes unless it hits your bullseye. That is a recipe for disaster, especially over the long term. Again, that's time wasted, money wasted, design, copy, development, all these things that go into CRO tests. You're just doing random stuff. You wouldn't really do that necessarily with most other things, right? You would try to learn from them, see what worked, get closer to it, get feedback, and then get closer to hitting that goal result. So best practices, their guess is as good as yours. So yours is actually better because you know your customer, you know your brand, you know your product. Truthfully, anything that you think might work is probably a better test idea than something random that you read off of somebody who doesn't know your brand, who's never looked at your data, who isn't familiar with anything that has worked or hasn't worked. Your instinct is going to be better than a best practice that is just not that relevant to you. And finally, myth number 3 is you don't need a real data analyst to be successful with CRO. This one's very similar to myth number 2, right? Where, hey, you can just test a bunch of stuff and things are going to work over time and great. You don't really need to analyze it. You don't need to do data segmentation. You don't need to, do qualitative analysis. You can just think of a test, build it up, launch it, and cool, you'll be good to go. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes you might get close to a bullseye, but is that going to be 1 in 10 tests? Probably. Something that most people don't know is that realistically, most CRO tests, the win rate, especially for in-house teams that do CRO tests, it's about 17%. It's not that easy. When you work with a good agency, that typically gets higher because they've done it. They can recognize patterns. They have a very large data set. They do the actual analysis. They have a data analyst that looks and segments the data, sees patterns and what's working and what's not working, sees the opportunities, sees the friction points. And their win rate with a good agency, that can be 25 to 55+%. So you can do it in-house, and you can try, and you're not going to be mad about 17% of your tests they win. That's okay, but I don't think you're going to be really excited about that, right? That's like 1 out of every 5 or so actually win. That's a lot of time, that's a lot of money, and especially when you're doing these isolated tests with traditional CRO, 5% win when only 17% of them get that 5% win. That's tough. That equals a lot of wasted months, a lot of wasted time, a lot of wasted resources, a lot of wasted just effort and hope. They're exciting when you launch tests, and it really sucks when you just don't reach statistical significance because the test wasn't based on data. It was just based on random guesses. And that happens very, very often. It's not necessarily that the other 80+% of tests don't win. Oftentimes they don't reach statistical significance because there was nothing of substance to that test. So nothing really is different, or nothing is really meaningful about the test that you ran, and it doesn't reach statistical significance because you didn't know what to focus on. So in summary, these are the myths. Myth number 1, isolated, iterative design and development changes are the best way to perform CRO. Nope, that's not it. You want to take big swings. You want to look at the entire experience and really create a compelling, motivating, full journey for your customers to persuade them from saying, not sure, to, heck yeah, I'm in. Myth number 2, you should care about best practices in CRO. No, busted. You don't really need to care. You can look at them, maybe they give you inspiration here and there, but are they things that you should go ahead and put in place? Not usually. They might actually end up taking you down the wrong path than the right path. And then number 3, you don't need a real data analyst to be successful with CRO. False. You want somebody who knows how to read your data, who knows how to pick away all of the trash and focus on those gems. You want somebody to be able to see, oh my God, there's these patterns in these segments, or there's these patterns in this behavior, and this is where we should really lean in because this is what is going to get us the win, and this is what is going to get us the win the fastest. So we don't waste months testing random stuff, and we don't waste hours and hours of time and energy into creating these tests that are based off of nothing. So guys, again, might be a little bit controversial. Let me know what you think in the comments. Otherwise, take these to heart. Good luck in your CRO, and I'll be back soon with some more helpful tidbits.